All right, folks, welcome to another episode of Island Sound and Story. We are here, as we always are, at Rebel Garage and Cafe. We thank them very much for hosting us. And today we have a blues aficionado, a blues expert, and the longtime CFUV host, Jim Martens. Jim, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm excited to talk to you, so
Oh,
I'm
good.
doing very well.
Good. And I talk.
Well, you've been talking on the station and on your show for, what is it, 13 years now?
12, 13 years. Yeah, like that. I can't even remember when I started. I just volunteered to help out in the summer and went on the air, and I'm still on.
Yeah, and so, well, how did that transition happen? You started volunteering, it was the summer, they
Yeah.
told you when the students come back, we'll switch to something else, and they
Yeah.
never did?
And then the students, I was a student. I know I didn't want to get up at 8 or 9 o'clock to do a radio show. So no one really wanted the spot. So I've stayed in it ever since.
And how have you seen the show evolve and its audience evolve?
Oh, I think that's a great question, actually. There's been all kinds of evolution. I used to play, there used to be two of us who did a blues show, and I used to do the stuff he didn't. So he liked folk blues, he liked the Mississippi Delta slide stuff.
Yeah.
I grew up on the blues, the British rock blues, so
Oh,
I'd play
gotcha.
more of that. Now I play a bit of everything. I try not to make it uncomfortably loud in the morning for 2 hours, so I try to play some folk and some things like that. I play a lot of local. Since I've
Yeah.
moved to Victoria, I've got to know a lot of the local people, and I think it's important to play local music on a local station. So it's evolved that way. And I find that actually, especially since COVID, people who are interested in blues seems to be much younger.
Okay, yeah. Why do you think that is?
Maybe because they had the time during COVID to look deeper into music they cared about and found out that it wasn't brand new. It sort of started around the turn of the 20th century and has evolved.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but it's nice to go out and see blues bands play, and the crowd doesn't look like they've come on the retirement home bus. There's a great band called the Smokestacks in town.
Yeah, I know
they're
some of
young.
those folks.
Yeah, they're great. So it's just sort of evolved that way. It's nice to see.
Yeah, well, I think it's a multi-generational thing too. I think that when you play blues, when you listen to blues, when you go out and see blues in town, it's an opportunity. Like I always, View Street Social, Herman's Jazz,
Yeah.
these kind of things. As a younger person, I'm not as young as I used to be, but you kind of come out and it's a way you can connect
Yeah.
with different generations, and they've established themselves there. They might be regulars, and I know karaoke, for instance, at View Street Social, it's a little different from other karaoke nights because I'm always thinking, okay, what can I sing that's gonna hit the friends that I have, and also the regulars, the people who've been coming here for a
Right.
couple 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is, and be music that they're going to respect and that we're going to have a connection with.
Yeah.
Do you find that happens with the blues shows in town, especially these days?
Well, I think it's true of blues. I also think it's true of our radio station. I think it's hilarious that I'm in my mid 70s and I'm constantly in touch with people like Colby, who you've had on the show, and
yeah.
he's probably in his mid 20s. We get along because we love music. We get along because we care about the station. Yeah, I think that's an important thing in Victoria, to have young people, old people together, sharing things that are important to them.
Especially, that's kind of a lot of what makes an art scene, a music scene.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Is that it's this kind of multi-generational, multi-demographic place for people to gather outside of their work, outside of the rest of life, commerce, etc. It's just kind of a community point of connection.
Yeah, I think that's true, and it's great. It's fun. I spent all my life working with younger people, so when I retired, I was concerned that I wouldn't have that input into my life, but working at the radio station, going to blues shows, I continue to have it. I taught university
What did you teach?
history.
Oh yeah. What periods? What specializations?
I worked at a very small college in Alberta, and I taught everything that wasn't Canadian. So I taught Greek and Roman, I taught British, I taught the history of sport for the phys ed department. I taught a lot of American history.
Yeah, but this is spanning thousands of years when you're talking Roman up
Yeah,
to...
no,
what
it was like the Canadian guy taught Canadian, and I got everything else. It's great. I loved it. I could work in the summer in my field, my area of specialty, but I got to, teach Greek and Roman history, which I never would have at a big university. It would have been even a different department, but at this small
It's nice
college.
to get to
Yeah, it was
diversify
great.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was your specialization?
British social history.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
And my MA was in slave resistance.
Gotcha.
All over, all different kinds of slave resistance.
Yeah, both fascinating subjects. And British social history, is that kind of the, class and enclosure of the commons and these
Yeah,
kinds
you
of
got
things?
it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was a few years ago now, and then you moved to Victoria?
Yeah, I moved here, and we were fixing our house up to move in when I found a station I liked the music, and I left it on all day, and they kept asking for volunteers. So I thought once we were done the rentals, I'd walk down and volunteer,
Sure.
and that's how I got on the station. It's great.
Yeah. And had community radio been something that you were interested in, participated in before that?
Well, when I was an undergraduate in the 70s, I worked at what was more of an underground university radio station with the guys with the deep voices, and they talked once every hour and played really long cuts by the Grateful Dead, that kind of radio. But this is really quite different. This is really consciously a community radio station that has a bigger sense than just simply telling you who played that side of the album you just heard. So, but I never really thought about it until I got here and just thought the music was nice. I got to do something. So I volunteered. It was good.
Yeah, well, I talked to Kobe about how it's kind of a way for people that are fans of different types of music, who grew up with different types of music, who are from countries with different types of music, to have sort of an imagined community together where you don't have to physically be there, but you can tune in, and suddenly you have this connection to the station, to the other people listening to it. How have you found that community end up being cultivated around your show?
Well, people all know who I am because I've been there a long time. I volunteer not just to be on the air, but I also, like Kobe and I are both on the board. Okay. We take care of those kind of little business things that the station has to deal with. So people get to know who you are. I listen to other shows. I make it a point not just to listen to the 3 or 4 friends that I have at the station, but to listen to all the new stuff. I like every kind of music, so it's not a big deal. I know people ask me, what's your favorite album? And sometimes Lauryn Hill is my favorite album. They go, really? But it's a great album too. That
Miseducation. Yeah.
So I think it is around the music. It's around sort of commitment to making the station work for the community. Again, Colby and I think it's hilarious. Like he's so much younger than me, and yet we get along, we talk, we work with each other on projects. Like we just finished the funding drive, and Colby was like fabulous.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you as well about the funding drive. I talked to him about it. And he said that you could really speak to, not the full 40 years, but you've seen about a decade plus of shift in the station. Mm-hmm. You've mentioned, I think, that the change in technologies, softwares, equipment. How have you seen, period years 30 to 40, the kind of last decade plus of the station evolve, shift, change? How has it changed? How has the challenges of the industry changed? What would you say?
Well, the big change, I think, for us was COVID. Mm-hmm. We shut down on a Wednesday. I was ready to do my Friday show. If I wanted to be on the air, I had to learn how to record my shows at home, send them in. They were put up for us by people. Yeah. And I mean, it was very challenging, but I thought what I really liked about it was I worked really hard to do it. And then we have a woman who does a show in a foreign language, and she wanted to continue to do her show and send it in. There used to be a rule you couldn't do your show off campus. You had to be in the station.
Yes,
Things change. Yeah. And she wanted someone who used an Apple computer, and I did. Okay. So I spent about an hour a day for about 2 weeks working with her, trying to teach her what I was just learning just shortly before to get her show up. And it reminded me of teaching university. I'm not a good teacher. They're great
Well,
learners.
you were a professional teacher.
Well, I was a professional teacher, and people, I guess some people said they like my stuff, but mostly when people want to learn, they're easy to teach. She was like amazing, like she just pounded out, and we'd have trouble communicating in language. I don't know any of the technical terms. I go, the little arrow, no, the other little arrow, and but she'd work through it, and it was really great to see that shift in the way we do things, the way we shifted as a station to you can't do a show outside the station to that's the only way you could do a show if you wanted to be on the air. The employees we have were fabulous. So it's great to see it kind of work together, teamwork kind of thing.
Yeah,
I really liked it.
Yeah, well, it's just kind of a lot of, it seems like partnerships and collaborations that come through the station as you're all kind of making this community project.
Yeah, it's great. And again, I'll listen to somebody's show and go, I could play that on my show.
And so it cross-pollinates.
Yeah, a lot of cross-pollination. There's people who do kind of eclectic music. We have a great show on Thursdays, 9 to 11, where in the middle of the show we place Hawaiian music.
Oh, yeah.
Where else are you going to hear Hawaiian music in Victoria on the air? It's wonderful.
Yeah, well, that's, I think, exactly what a lot of you get from community radio, because I remember I grew up in Kelowna, it was, and me and my dad, my family, were some of the few Caribbean people in Kelowna, but we could turn on the Vancouver, I think it was CFRO, community radio, and I talked to Kobe about this. We could put that on and hear from Vancouver that on community radio there was soca, there was calypso, there was reggae, and so that was kind of a point of connection for us, and I'm sure for thousands of other people who could tune in and kind of hear sounds from the islands on that night. And so in Calgary, I think we would put on community radio, and it would be Romanian music or something it was. And so it seems like a way for fans of different styles, but also, these diasporas to kind of have a point of connection. And I'm curious, especially for blues, but for blues in the morning specifically, that's a certain mood. What's the listener base like? Do they come up to you? Do they talk to you? Do you have a sense of who they are? Do they come out to shows? Who are the listeners?
Yeah, they phone me, they email me. They're mostly older because they see blues, they like it. Also, they're home. At one point when we used to keep track of these kind of things, someone told me that my average listener was about a 35-year-old who worked at home.
Oh yeah.
Or looked after kids at home, which I think is really work. That's the hard part. So it's good, and they'll send me things like I play in a band. Would you play this on your show? And I go, yeah, if I can get it in, I'll play it. I lived in the Bahamas for a while.
Oh really?
Yeah, and so I get a chance to play and. Music, like all cultures, sort of spread through the Gulf of Mexico with trade and everything from Louisiana into the Bahamas into the islands, and the music got exchanged. So I play Bahamian music sometimes that you just do not hear anywhere else.
Really?
Yeah. I love what they call rake and scrape.
Oh yeah.
I
don't know much about it, but tell us about it.
Well, they wouldn't let slaves have musical instruments.
Yeah.
So if they wanted to dance, have fun, celebrate, they'd have like drums or shells and
put together what you could.
Yeah, what you could, make music, what you could with saws. Actually, that's what got my attention at first. This guy's playing a saw. Can you lose an eye with that? So I sound like my mom, but I love it because it was so enthusiastic, and it's a great way of celebration. And they still have a Rake and Scrape festival, and I think it's on Cat Island in the Bahamas every year. And so I play Rake and Scrape sometimes and say, it's connected to blues. These guys have a connection. Yeah.
Well, you see those connections because isn't it often in bluegrass you see sometimes the use of the saw?
Yeah, it is. That's actually about the only place I would have thought you'd ever see a saw, and it was I always thought it was sort of done for comical reasons, but not for serious, social, cultural reasons. And so I get people who go, it's nice to hear that, or it's nice to hear something that I hadn't thought about as being blues. I saw a great interview with Chuck Berry about a month ago where he said, there's blues, which is 12-bar blues, but there's also a guy feeling bad, somebody feeling really down. That's the blues, whether it's Frank Sinatra sitting there having one more for the road because his girlfriend dumped him, or it's B.B. King. It's still the blues.
There's a shared sensibility.
Yeah. I thought that was a great way to put it. So that's sort of the way I think about it. I try to have a big tent.
Yeah. And I'll ask you a little bit more about that in a moment. I'm just going to check the door and check the recording, make sure we're all straight. I'll
Sure.
be back in 20 seconds.
Sure.
All right, I think we're doing good.
Okay.
I'll maybe just angle yourself or your chair a little bit towards the camera.
Oh. I have a face for radio. That's what.
No, you've got a face for video. Don't sell yourself short. And you got a tie for video. So
I do have a tie for video. I'll give you that. Yeah.
all right, so to jump back in, I wanted to ask you about, you talked about Bahamian music, the connection with blues, different types of music. What are some other examples of what you play on the show where it's an unexpected combination, it's a different style of blues that people might expect, it's from a different part of the world? What are some of these unique types of music that you play?
Well, I'm trying to think. When I first started doing my show, I used to get at least one phone call or email a week that would tell me that song wasn't blues. And I go, okay, well, it is to me, or I understand it to be. And, I just sort of never gave up playing stuff I think is important. A good example is Sue Decker is a local slide guitar player.
Yeah.
And she's a country blues player.
Mm-hmm.
It's sometimes more country, sometimes more blues. But they're together. I mean, these sort of categories were invented when marketing of records started in a big way in the 20s and 30s. They didn't exist before. People wouldn't go, I'm not playing that. They all come together. So I try to play country blues. I try to play blues from Europe. I just started playing a woman named Kyla Brox. She's from Birmingham in England, and she can belt it out like Aretha Franklin style. And she's in her 40s. I think, where the hell have they been hiding this woman for all those years? So I started playing her stuff, and now we Instagram back and forth sometimes. And
well, there's there's the local community, the direct community of listeners, but by showcasing blues music, you kind of get plugged into this whole global community of blues enthusiasts, blues makers, blues singers, etc.
Yeah. When you mentioned community blues too, I was thinking of this. We should be very proud. The Juno for Blues this year went to an island duo, Blue Moon Marquee. They are fabulous.
They're out of Cowichan Valley, aren't they?
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, I remember years ago standing at the side of the stage and they were playing, and I was standing beside Holger Peterson, who is the blues aficionado of Canada, and we didn't say anything. I went to school with his brother, so I know who he was. We just sort of looked at each other when they were playing and smiled. Went, that's good music. Yeah, and I know a lot of people might not think it's really blues, but it really is.
Yeah. Well, what sets it apart? Give people a kind of a sense of what makes them unique.
Makes them unique. I think lyrically they're very Canadian. And very personal. Well, they have this kind of a Django Reinhardt kind of guitar style, but also Howlin' Wolf kind of voice. And then every once in a while, when you get Al's voice, when you had a few or enough of that, you start getting like duets together, and Jasmine Collette will take over and do a totally different kind of bluesy voice.
Gotcha. So there's versatility there.
Yeah, there's only two of them, and they are remarkably versatile. Yeah, and they're just, and I know they sing about some very serious issues, but they make me really happy.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what how music functions in a large part, and the blues too, is to kind of have a way to talk about things, to process things, to express often very deep feelings in a way that connects to people, in a way that draws people in. Sometimes it makes them dance, sometimes it makes them wallow, but it's that connection, that collision, that integration of them and their story and how they're feeling, and the listener, and finding some way to connect.
Yeah, oh, I think that's true. Yeah, it's funny. It's the first time I ever saw a Blue Moon Marquee album cover. I looked at it and thought, I know that place, and it was taken in the city hall of Red Deer, where I taught.
Oh wow!
And he's from near Red Deer, and I think she lived in Red Deer, so there was that connection. So when I started listening to those songs, I knew what they were singing about. So there was that connection.
Yeah.
There's just lots of phenomenal players in this town. You can go out pretty much almost every night of the week and hear somebody that'll just knock your socks off, who don't have to be blues.
Yeah, there's quite a variety.
Yeah.
I know that's true of most cities, but I think in Victoria, not only, and kind of the South Island, not only is there a variety of music being played, but I think maybe because of the size of the scene, I don't know what, but I think audiences are more open to hearing different types of music on one bill. That show that Kobe put on the other day, for instance, ranged from kind of very hard rock to, bluegrass to, kind of indie music. Also he puts on, and especially on his show where it's all new music.
Yeah,
I think you see a lot of artists that you hear on the show together, and they range in genres, but often they'll be on the same bill for different bands that have all different styles. Do you find that? And
I'm quite surprised. And there's a big dance community built around blues in Victoria, so they like the dance kind of music. But you can go out to Herman's and listen to some great, not necessarily dance-oriented blues music. They bring in people that are great. There's people around, like Sue Decker. She has a band now, and people are dancing to her, but she's much more listenable for me. Bill Johnson, who's an amazing electric guitar player. I just heard a couple weeks ago do an acoustic set for about, I don't know, maybe an hour. I would have paid for more. It was just wonderful to listen to. It's a great community, especially having lived in Red Deer, which is a really small community, and we don't get the big acts or the medium-sized acts. Coming here, it was like, for me, it was heaven.
Yeah.
And again, as you say, variety. There's none of this, I don't go to that, or I don't want to see this.
Yeah. You talked about kind of coming here, and I think for a lot of people that come here to come to BC, come to the island, it really does stand out as a place where there is arts and culture happening, where there's different types of music, these kinds of things. Have you found that is shifting, that is in jeopardy at all, with how expensive things have gotten, the loss of some of these venues? Has that been a change that you've seen? Have people recovered in a certain way and managed around it? What have you kind of noticed over your time here?
Well, that's a good question, because I'm very concerned about the loss of space, the opportunity to play. I grew up in Winnipeg, and one of the things that makes Winnipeg a big music city at the time was there was somewhere to play for every band in town. If you had a band, you had a place to play. Here it's a smaller city, and I worry about Herman's. Well, I'm quite surprised that there isn't a big hall here. Like there's a hockey arena, but there's no big hall. I don't know why.
Because there's kind of I think the Polish Hall, and there's Capitol Ballroom. There's kind of just that size around there or just below it, but not necessarily a straight music hall.
Yeah. On the university campus, the Farquhar Auditorium's a great hall.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot.
I guess the Royal Theatre, but that's more of kind of a fancy theatre, sit-down type of place.
Yeah, Royal and McPherson. I've seen some great shows at those places, though I can't really complain. I think COVID, of course, was hard, and the comeback's slow. But again, I didn't go out for a long time after, and when I went out, that's when I went to one of the blues jams on Sunday. I walked in and, the smokestacks were playing. Holy mackerel, it's like being a kid again, watching a young band with fringes and long hair and playing the great blues songs. So there seems to be a kind of a revitalization around younger people getting out and going to do things. And I think it'll just continue to improve. And it costs a lot, but I mean, you get your money's worth here. There's a show coming up that's like very, very inexpensive, like $20 for 6 bands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you get a lot of those.
Yeah,
It's a little pricier, but you got a ton of bands, a ton of DJs, whatever it might be.
I think it's true in other areas, but I also find it with blues. The community here is very loyal to local bands. I don't know if we're going to sell out a middle-of-the-road blues act from the States, but I always know when, McKinley Wolf or Deb Reimer Blues Band plays, the places they're playing in are going to be packed.
Yeah.
And again, that was at Beacon Ridge Productions.
Like that.
Yeah, and they bring in great acts, and I've never been to a show that wasn't sold out. So if you give people good music and good value, they'll come back and they'll be loyal and support those kind of programs and shows.
Yeah, it seems like there's kind of a born out of necessity to kind of support local because you get so many acts that can't cross the ferry. It's not worth their while. And so you have to kind of cultivate something local to have as much music as you want kind of domestically. Speaking, you mentioned Herman's. Obviously, we just had, I think it's 2 days from when we're recording this, the closure of at least the current iteration of Herman's Upstairs, which is a venue that the Smokestacks, as you mentioned, I think I played quite a number of times. How do you see that? Does that concern you? Do you think that with the city buying the venue, it'll be right back in it? What does that kind of mean for the landscape in your view?
Well, I hope that the city makes an effort and makes it quickly to sort of revitalize Herman's to get it back to being Herman's. I mean, Herman's is legendary. Like, I knew Herman's long before I ever moved here. It's where people want to play. It's where good people play. Herman's Upstairs gets the rock, and bands that are more amplified, like the Smokestacks, and it's just a venue we can't afford to lose. And every musician I talk to says it's a great place to play.
Yeah, and it had kind of a loyal audience even via kind of remotely through early COVID. They really made an effort to kind of bring bands in, have them play, and have a live stream of it to keep some form of this kind of local music happening, keep people kind of getting booked. And that kind of thing.
Yeah, giving people work. So, you keep your fingers crossed that the city will get on it, get together a committee that'll, if not make a ton of money for Herman's, at least keep it going, keep it viable, and, build from there. I was heartbroken when I heard about it. But again, I have faith. And there's another place that the city helped support. They didn't buy it, but it was another venue, up a flight of stairs. Event center.
Yeah, the big event center.
Yeah, I think they helped them out there. It's great to see the city do that.
Yeah, I think they had some funding for upgrades or something along those lines. But I think I wanted to, as we talk about kind of the present and the future of venues in town, music in town, I want to bring it back before I let you go to the future of the station. You had your funding drive, obviously. What does this how does the kind of model work with kind of getting funding from the community? How does the kind of community around it kind of come together once a year to support that? And what do you think will be the future of the station?
Well, I think the station's in good hands. We've always had a good staff, but this staff is especially good. They're innovative, they're helpful, and they got a real sense of the community. And I think that we'll continue to prosper. We're doing quite well. Like, we're not ever going to be incredibly rich, but I think we'll continue to grow and develop. I think again with podcasts, we were one of the first people around doing
That's
those
true,
things because we
yeah.
thought it was important.
Syndication as well, helping people
yeah.
get a podcast started, and now
Yeah.
there's a bunch run
Yeah.
out of there.
And a lot of people who started out with our podcast have gone on to work for CBC, work for other projects that are much bigger and are very important. So I think we'll continue to do that. We're very open to new ideas, new kind of approaches to radio. I love the fact that, like, I grew up in radio. It was like, you get 3 stations and you had to wait for an hour to hear a Beatles song or a Rolling Stone song.
Yeah.
Now if you miss Tidal Zone on 7 o'clock on Monday morning, you can tune it in all week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's not radio by appointment anymore. It provides much greater options to listeners who like that kind of music, right?
Yeah.
So if you, like, maybe no one really wanted the Sunday morning 7 o'clock show before because no one would listen to it. Now I can really like whatever the music is, go and tune it in on Wednesday afternoon while I'm cleaning the house and listen to it. That's a huge innovation from my childhood to now in listening to radio, and it's been great, and the station's really good at it.
Yeah. Well, I want to wrap up actually on that note by asking you about your particular time slot, which is Friday morning. It has been for a long while. What characterizes blues in the morning? Is there a certain mood you try to hit, a certain expectation you have of what the listener is doing that you try to manage, or is it just a music show's a music show? How do you deal with the exact kind of blues in the morning moniker and kind of framing?
That's a question I ask myself all the time. Okay. Well, I try to have a theme for one thing, or something to sort of tie it to. Again, the Junos are just over, so I'm going to play all the Juno Blues nominees.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky because they're fabulous. All the nominees were great. So I do play, Joe Bonamassa or Jeff Beck. But I try not to make it 2 hours of screaming blues guitar. I mean, I grew up with that screaming blues guitar, but there's sort of North Mississippi blues. I try to play that. I try to play more sort of subdued stuff, or more acoustic stuff. We have an acoustic blues show as well. It's extremely good. So I don't want to take all that away.
Sure,
but I try not to make it overpowering.
Yeah.
But I got to admit, I play a lot of soul, stuff like that.
Well, that kind of gets you right for your day, gets you some spiritual nourishment, some kind of cultural nourishment.
Well, I'm glad you
like
think
a good
so.
breakfast.
Yeah.
And on that note, let's wrap up by getting what you would say for someone who maybe likes a certain style of blues and wants to branch out. Or someone who's more new to the blues. Who would you recommend they listen to? How would you recommend they listen? Is there some certain way of listening or some characteristic to the music, to the history of it? What's your pitch to hook someone who's blues curious? Let's say?
Well, that's hard because everyone's different, I guess. But you might want to say to someone, well, you like the Chicago blues, a lot of electric guitar from the 60s. Well, that Muddy Waters used to do kind of folk blues, and that's how they found them. You might want to go back to that kind of stuff that got Muddy started and do a little sort of, I hate to say this, do a little history of the music you like, right? Yeah. It's there for you. It'll take you, and then young Muddy will talk about how he learned from Robert Johnson or he learned from Son House.
Absolutely.
And see all the connections. Like don't abandon what you love. Build on what you love. That's kind of what I'd say.
And it's fleshing out the history, seeing the connections. It seems like that's something that really interests you, and I think a lot of blues fans.
Yeah, well, I think so. And again, it's if you're looking at Southern U.S. blues, it's important to understand that it was one of the few ways that people could communicate or get their feelings out. A lot of them weren't necessarily well educated. They didn't have access to everything, but they did have access to vocals and to singing and to instruments, and they could bring that together. I find it a great way to understand history, like the 1927 Mississippi flood.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, when the levee breaks, that's not Zeppelin singing about the 1927 flood. That's Memphis Minnie, and then they take her. They found me. They get it from Memphis Minnie. So
Yeah.
the musicians do the history. So I think it's important that the listener, or it's good that the listener will want to find that history.
Absolutely. And well, we've got 40 years of history at CFUV.
Yeah.
I hope you folks get another 40 plus.
Oh yeah, me too.
And I'm very grateful to you for giving us a history lesson, giving us a local music lesson, and for taking the time to appear on the show.
Well, if I can sell the radio station, I'll appear on any show anytime. How's that?
Absolutely.
Good.
All right. For Island Sound and Story, we are here at Rebel Garage, and we appreciate you tuning in and spending some of your time with us as well. Take care, and we'll see you next time.